Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was adopted by son of President Mike. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not silent. It never was. For Hibiki Yamada, silence was a canvas he had to paint himself. To the average person, the world was a collection of visual stimuli, colors, shapes, light and shadow. But for Hibiki, known in the underground hero circles as Reverb, the world was a constant, thrumming map of vibrations. He could hear the electricity buzzing in the street lamps like angry hornets. He could hear the shifting of tectonic plates deep in the earth like the groaning of a waking giant. He could hear the heartbeat of a stray cat 3 blocks away. But right now, all he could hear was screaming. Musitifa was burning. Not the whole city, but a significant block of the downtown district. A villain fight, some belister with a kinetic amplification quirk against a rookie hero who hadn't checked their collateral damage, had gone wrong. Horribly, catastrophically wrong. A 6-story commercial complex had collapsed in on itself, taking a chunk of the neighboring sidewalk and subway entrance with it. Hibiki adjusted the dial on his headset, his yellow-tinted visor flashing with acoustic data. He wasn't a powerhouse like All Might. He wasn't a destructive force like his father, President Mike. Hibiki was a ghost. He was the guy you called when you needed to find a needle in a haystack, provided the haystack was made of concrete and the needle was breathing. Reverb, status. The voice of the on-site rescue commander crackled in his ear. Working on it, Hibiki muttered, his voice low. He didn't need to shout. I'm activating the dampener. I need everyone on the north perimeter to shut up. No sirens. No drilling. Give me 10 seconds. Copy that. North perimeter, silence on Reverb's mark. Hibiki stepped up to the jagged edge of the ruin. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes behind his visor. He raised his hands, palms facing the wreckage. Quirk, dead zone. It wasn't just about hearing, it was about control. Hibiki pushed a pulse of anti-sound from his palms. It washed over the frantic rescue workers, the sobbing bystanders, and the roaring fires. For a 50-meter radius, absolute silence fell. The fire still burned, but it didn't crackle. The sirens spun, but they didn't wail. In that artificial void, Hibiki listened. He sent out a sharp, high-frequency click from his throat. Human echolocation pushed to a superhuman degree. Ping! The sound wave traveled through the rubble. It bounced off steel beams, phased through drywall, and reflected off pockets of air. The data rushed back to his brain, constructing a 3D wireframe map of the destruction in his mind. Nothing there. Just crushed stone. Nothing there. Unstable piping. He swept the area again, sweat beading on his forehead. The strain of maintaining the dead zone was immense. Ping! There, deep down. Almost 20 feet below the surface level, trapped in what used to be a subway stairwell that had been crushed by the falling building. 2 heartbeats. One was frantic, fast, erratic. A hummingbird's wings. The other was slowing down. Thump, thump, thump. Found them! Hibiki shouted, dropping the dead zone. The roar of the world came rushing back, sirens, screams, fire, like a physical blow, but Hibiki was already moving. Sector 4. Beneath the support pillar, I need a path cleared now. He didn't wait for the heavy lifters. Hibiki slid down a precarious slope of rebar and concrete, his boots finding purchase on shifting slate. He was an underground hero for a reason. He moved like water. Hey! He projected his voice, throwing it so it would sound like it was coming from right next to the survivors. Can you hear me? I'm a hero. I'm coming for you. No response. The rubble was too thick. Death arms. Hibiki pointed at a massive slab of concrete. Lift this. Backdraft. Cool the rebar on the left so it doesn't snap. The heroes moved with practiced efficiency. Hibiki guided them, his ears acting as the radar. Left, more left, stop. There's a gas pocket. Bypass it. It took 20 agonizing minutes to create a hole big enough for a person to fit through. Hibiki didn't hesitate. He clicked a flashlight onto his shoulder mount and dove into the dark, claustrophobic tunnel. The air smelled of pulverized drywall and copper blood. It was hot, suffocatingly so. Hibiki crawled, scraping his tactical gear against jagged metal. "Hello?" A small, trembling voice echoed. It was barely a whisper, but to Hibiki, it sounded like a shout. "I'm here," Hibiki softened his voice. "I'm Reverb." "What's your name?" "Izuku." The voice hitched. "Mom. Mom isn't waking up." Hibiki's stomach dropped. He scrambled forward, pushing aside a broken vending machine that had formed a chaotic lean-to. There, in a pocket of space barely 4 feet high, was a mess of green hair. The boy Izuku was small. Too small for the amount of dust covering him. He was curled into a ball, clutching a yellow backpack to his chest. His eyes were wide, luminous green, and filled with a terror that no child should ever know. And beneath him, shielding him with her own body, was a woman. Inko Midoriya had taken the brunt of the collapse. A steel girder, part of the building's skeleton, had come down directly over them. She had caught it. For a split second, she had caught it with a telekinetic pull, just enough to stop it from crushing her son instantly. But the weight had been too much. Hibiki didn't need his quirk to know. He reached out, placing 2 fingers on the woman's neck. Silence. The one sound Hibiki hated most. "She's sleeping," Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. He was covered in scratches, his favorite All Might t-shirt torn and stained. She said to be quiet so the villains wouldn't hear us, so I was quiet. I was really quiet." Hibiki swallowed the lump in his throat. He looked at the boy. The kid was in shock. He was vibrating, a low-frequency tremble of pure trauma. "You did good, Izuku," Hibiki said, his voice steady despite the grief clawing at his chest. "You did a great job being quiet. But you can be loud now. I've got you." "Mom needs a doctor," Izuku insisted, his eyes darting to Hibiki's visor. "Are you a hero?" "Your frequency, it's weird. You stepped quiet, but your heart is really loud." Hibiki froze. "My frequency?" "The humming," Izuku mumbled, his eyes losing focus. He tapped the side of his own head. "The walls stopped humming when you shouted before." "How did you do that?" Hibiki stared. The kid was in the middle of a traumatic event, sitting next to his deceased mother, and he was analyzing Hibiki's quirk? It wasn't normal. It was a defense mechanism. The boy's brain was trying to rationalize the chaos by latching onto logic. "I'll tell you later," Hibiki said gently. He moved to pick the boy up. "We need to go, Izuku." "No! Mom!" Izuku thrashed, grabbing Inko's cold hand. "We can't leave her. The other heroes are going to help her," Hibiki lied. "It was a mercy. But I need to get you out first. The tunnel isn't safe. Please, Izuku. Trust me." Izuku looked at his mother, then at Hibiki. Tears finally spilled over, cutting tracks through the dust on his freckled cheeks. He nodded, a broken, jerky motion. Hibiki lifted the boy. He was light. Fragile. As Hibiki crawled back out of the darkness, shielding Izuku's eyes from the glare of the emergency lights, he felt the boy press his face into the leather of Hibiki's hero jacket. And then, he heard it, a muttering. Fast, rhythmic like a prayer. Structure collapse, trajectory, hero reverb sound-based, rescue specialist, Mom saved me, Mom. Hibiki tightened his hold. He emerged into the smoke-filled evening, the flashing lights of ambulances painting the world in red and blue. He handed Izuku over to the paramedics. But as the boy's hands slipped from his jacket, Hibiki felt a phantom weight remain. He watched them load the kid into the ambulance. He watched the body bag come out 10 minutes later. Hibiki Yamada stood in the noise of the aftermath, but for the first time in his life, he felt utterly, hollowly empty. The Muzutafu General Hospital waiting room was a study in sterile misery. The fluorescent lights hummed a D-flat that was giving Hibiki a migraine. He sat in the plastic chair, still in his hero gear, though he had removed the visor and the heavy tactical pads. His blonde hair, usually styled in a messy, effortless sweep, was matted with dust. He looked less like the rising underground star Reverb and more like a tired 26-year-old man who had seen too much. "Yamada," Hibiki looked up. Detective Tsukachi Naomasa stood there, holding a clipboard and a cup of lukewarm coffee. The detective looked as tired as Hibiki felt. "How is he?" Hibiki asked. "Physically?" Scrapes, bruises, mild dehydration. He's fine, Tsukachi sighed, sitting in the adjacent chair. Mentally? He's quiet. He hasn't spoken since he asked about his mother. Did you tell him? The doctors did. There's no easy way to do that. Hibiki rubbed his face with his hands. Family? Father? Tsukachi flipped a page on the clipboard. Father is Hisashi Midoriya. Working overseas in America. We've been trying to contact him for 3 hours. No answer. Voicemail is full. According to records, he hasn't been in the country in 5 years. Abandonment? Financial support only, it seems. But with the mother gone. Tsukachi grimaced. Look, Reverb. You did your job. You saved the kid. I saved half the family, Hibiki corrected bitterly. You know how this works. You can't save everyone. I know. Hibiki leaned back, his head thumping against the wall. What happens to him now? Tsukachi hesitated. The pause was loud. Emergency foster placement. Until the father is reached, if he's reached. If not, he enters the system permanently. The system is garbage, Tsukachi. Especially for. Hibiki paused. He remembered the boy's desperate analysis in the tunnel. Does he have a quirk? He mumbled something about frequencies. Tsukachi looked at the file. He tapped the paper with his pen, a rhythmic, damning sound. That's the other thing. The registry just came back. Izuka Midoriya. Quirkless. Hibiki blinked. Quirkless? Diagnosed at 4. Extra toe joint, the whole works. But he heard me, Hibiki frowned. In the tunnel. He asked why the walls stopped humming when I used my dampener. He analyzed my quirk usage instantly. High perception isn't a quirk, Yamada. It's just being smart. Tsukachi stood up. He's quirkless. And he's an orphan. I don't need to tell you what the foster system is like for kids like that. It's going to be brutal. Hibiki looked toward the closed door of the pediatric ward. He could hear the boy's heartbeat through the wood. It was slow, steady, and terribly lonely. Can I see him? Tsukachi softened. 5 minutes. Then social services takes over. Hibiki pushed the door open. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlights outside. Izuku was sitting on the edge of the bed, his legs dangling, not touching the floor. He was clutching the yellow backpack, the only thing he had left. Hibiki walked in. He didn't try to be quiet. He let his boots scuff the floor so the boy would know he was there. Izuku looked up. His eyes were red and puffy, but dry. You're the loud hero, Izuku said. I'm Reverb, Hibiki corrected, pulling up a stool. Hibiki Yamada, you couldn't save her. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. It hit Hibiki harder than any punch he'd ever taken. No, Hibiki said. I couldn't. And I'm sorry. Izuku stared at his hands. It's okay. The math didn't work. The math? The weight of the building versus her output, Izuku mumbled, his voice monotone. She could pull small objects. The girder was 3 tons? Maybe 4. She held it for 6 seconds. That's amazing. She was amazing. Hibiki stared at this 7-year-old boy who was rationalizing his mother's death through physics to keep his heart from shattering. It was the saddest thing Hibiki had ever seen. She was a hero, Izuku, Hibiki said firmly. She saved you. I'm quirkless, Izuku said suddenly, looking Hibiki in the eye. That means I can't be a hero. Everyone says so. Kaken says so. Kaken? A friend. Or, he used to be. Izuku gripped the backpack straps. Where am I going? A temporary home, Hibiki said. Just for a little while. Will it be loud there? Hibiki paused. He thought of the overcrowded foster homes, the yelling, the chaos. Probably. Izuku nodded. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a notebook. The cover was charred, the edges singed. Hero analysis for the future number 2. Can you sign this? Izuku asked, holding it out. Hibiki stared at the book. You want my autograph? I'm the guy who was there when you came for me, Izuku said. Nobody else heard me. You heard me. Hibiki took the notebook. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled a marker from his belt. He signed his hero name on the inside cover, Reverb. Stay loud. He didn't know why he wrote that. It just felt right. A woman in a beige suit knocked on the door. Time to go, Izuku. Izuku slid off the bed. He looked tiny next to the social worker. He looked back at Hibiki one last time, clutching the notebook to his chest like a shield. Thank you, Mr. Reverb. Hibiki watched him leave. The door clicked shut. The silence in the room was deafening. 2 weeks later, the rain in Musudifo was relentless. It drummed against the windows of the Starry Night foster home, a dilapidated building on the east side of the city. Hibiki sat in his car across the street. He was in civilian clothes, a leather jacket with a high collar, skinny jeans, and yellow-tinted sunglasses despite the gloom. The radio was playing a jazz track, something his father had recommended, but Hibiki wasn't listening. He was focused on the house across the street. He activated his quirk, narrowing the focus to a specific room on the second floor. Useless, Deku. Don't bother feeding him, he just mutters. Freak, trip him. Hibiki's grip on the steering wheel tightened until the leather creaked. He had visited 3 times. Each time, the staff put on a smile. Each time, they said Izuku was adjusting. But Hibiki's ears didn't lie. He heard the hushed insults. He heard the other kids shoving Izuku into walls. He heard Izuku crying into his pillow at night, trying to muffle the sound so he wouldn't be punished. Izuku Midoriya was rotting in there. Hibiki pulled his phone out. He dialed a number he knew by heart. You. Listener. The voice on the other end was so loud Hibiki had to hold the phone away from his ear. You're on the air with Present Mike. Wait, no, I'm off air. Hey son! What's poppin'? Dad, Hibiki said, his voice flat. I need a favor. A big one. The tone on the other end shifted instantly. The persona dropped. Hisashi Yamada was a loudmouth, but he was also incredibly intuitive. Where are you, Hibiki? You sound heavy. I'm outside that foster home. The one where the Midoriya kid was placed. Ah, Hisashi sighed. The boy from the collapse. Shota told me you've been haunting that place. They're abusing him, Dad. Not physically, maybe not enough to leave marks yet, but the neglect. The verbal stuff. The other kids are targeting him because he's quirkless, and the staff is turning a blind eye. That's, unfortunately, common, Hisashi said softly. The system is flawed, Hibi. You know that. He's smart, Dad, Hibiki said, staring at the window where he knew Izuku was sitting. He analyzes quirks. He breaks down situations. He's 7 years old and he understands structural integrity and sound wave propagation. He has the mind of a pro. Okay, and he's got this sadness. But he's not angry. He's just trying to survive. Hibiki took a breath. I want to take him. Silence on the line. Then take him? Like kidnap him? Because I cannot bail you out of that, and Shota will arrest you. Adopt him, Dad? I want to adopt him, Hibiki, Hisashi said, his voice serious now. You're 26. You're single. You're an active underground hero working 60-hour weeks. A kid isn't a goldfish. I know that. Hibiki snapped, then lowered his voice. I know. But I can't leave him there. I can't listen to him fade away. I see myself in him, Dad. Before you and Mom adopted me? When everyone thought my hearing was creepy? When I wouldn't speak? Hisashi was quiet for a long moment. You think you can handle it? I don't know, Hibiki admitted. But I have you. And I have Shota. We're a weird pack, but we work. We do, Hisashi agreed, a smile creeping into his voice. Okay. If you're serious, I'm in. I'll call the lawyers. Being a top 10 hero has its perks. We can fast-track the background checks and the competency hearings. But you have to be sure, Hibi. Once you sign those papers, you're his anchor. I'm sure, Hibiki said, watching a shadow move across the window in the foster home. He needs someone to be loud for him. Then let's make some noise, Hisashi declared. Come over. We have paperwork to do. The process took another 3 weeks. To Izuku, it felt like 3 years. Life at the Starry Night home was gray. That was the only way he could describe it. The food tasted gray. The walls were gray. The voices of the other kids were gray static that scratched at his brain. Hey, Deku! Izuku flinched as a boy with extendable fingers flicked the back of his head. Izuku didn't look up from his notebook. He was trying to figure out if Empty Lady's size change affected her bone density, or if she manipulated mass from another dimension. Stop ignoring me, Quirkless! The boy grabbed the notebook. Give it back, Izuku whispered. Or what? You gonna cry for your mommy? The boy laughed. Oh wait, she's flat. Like a pancake. The other kids laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. Izuku felt the tears prick his eyes. Don't cry. Don't cry. Analyze the situation. 3 aggressors. No exit. Best strategy, endure. He curled in on himself, preparing for the shove, the kick, the usual. Yamada! A staff member shouted from the hallway. We have a visitor from Midoriya. Bring him down. The bullies froze. A visitor? For Deku? Izuku looked up, hope fluttering in his chest like a trapped bird. He walked down the stairs, clutching his backpack. In the hallway stood the social worker, looking annoyed, and a man. It was Reverb. He looked different. He wasn't wearing his hero suit. He was wearing a black t-shirt with a band logo on it, jeans, and checkered sneakers. He had glasses on, thick frames that made him look like a scholar. Hey kid, Hibiki said, a small, crooked smile on his face. Mr. Reverb? Izuku squeaked. Just Hibiki is fine, he said. He crouched down so he was eye level with Izuku. You pack light? I only have this. Izuku gestured to his bag. Hibiki nodded. He stood up and looked at the staff member. His eyes, usually warm behind the glasses, turned cold as ice. We're leaving. I assume the paperwork is finalized? Yes, Mr. Yamada. He's all yours. Good luck with him, the woman sniffed. He's a gloomy one. Hibiki ignored her. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Ready to blow this popsicle stand? Izuku didn't understand the phrase, but he nodded vigorously. Yes. Please. They walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, but to Izuku, it smelled like freedom. Hibiki led him to a sleek, black car. Hop in the front. You're too short for the airbag to kill you, probably. Is that safe? Izuku asked, climbing in. Life isn't safe, kid. But we manage. Hibiki got in the driver's seat. He turned the key, and the engine purred. A soft electronic beat began to play from the speakers. As they drove through the city, the silence between them stretched. But it wasn't the heavy silence of the hospital. It was anticipatory. Why? Izuku asked quietly. Hibiki didn't look away from the road. Why what? Why me? I'm quirkless. I'm helpless. Hibiki tapped the steering wheel in time with the music. You know, when I was your age I didn't talk. My quirk made everything too loud. I could hear people chewing in the next room. I could hear electricity in the walls. It hurt. So I just shut down. Izuku looked at him, wide-eyed. My dad, my adopted dad, he was the opposite. Loudest guy on the planet. But he taught me that noise isn't bad. You just have to tune it. You have to find your own frequency. Hibiki glanced at Izuku. I saw you in that tunnel, Izuku. You weren't helpless. You were analyzing. You were thinking. You have a hero's brain. The rest? We can train the rest. But I don't have a power. Neither does Batman, Hibiki smirked. And he could kick Superman's ass with enough prep time, Izuku gasped. You read pre-quirk comics? I own them all. First editions. You can read them. Assuming you wash your hands first. Izuku's jaw dropped. For the first time in weeks, a genuine spark returned to his eyes. We're here, Hibiki announced. They pulled up to a high-end apartment complex. It wasn't a skyscraper, but it was nice. Very nice. I live on the 3rd floor. Soundproof walls. Essential for my line of work. They took the elevator up. Izuku was vibrating with nerves again. Is anyone else there? Just family, Hibiki said. Don't worry. They're a lot. But they're good. Hibiki unlocked the door 3B. He pushed it open. I'm home. Hibiki called out, but he covered his ears immediately after. Surprise! The shout was physical. A shockwave of sound blasted through the apartment. Izuku yelped and ducked behind Hibiki's legs. Standing in the middle of the living room was a tall man with blonde hair that defied gravity, wearing a leather jacket and orange sunglasses. He was holding a cake that said "Welcome home, little listener" and garish icing. Next to him, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else, was a man in black with long, messy black hair and a capture scarf around his neck. He was holding a party popper that he had unenthusiastically pulled. "Dad, you scared him." Hibiki sighed, stepping into the room. "Tone it down to a 4, please." Sorry. The loud man, wait, Izuku thought, his brain short-circuiting. That's Present Mike. The voice hero. That's Present Mike in a living room. And Eraserhead? Izuku whispered, peeking out from behind Hibiki. The dark-haired man raised an eyebrow. He knows who I am. Impressive. Nobody knows who I am. He's a fanboy, Uncle Sho, Hibiki grinned. He gently pushed Izuku forward. Izuku, this is my dad, Hisashi Yamada. You know him as Present Mike. And that ray of sunshine is Shota Aizawa. He's practically your uncle now. Hisashi knelt down. Up close, he was overwhelming, but his smile was genuine and dazzling. Hey there, Izuku. Hibiki told us all about you. We're super stoked to have you here. Yeah. He held out a hand for a high five. Izuku stared at the hand. Then at the cake. Then at Hibiki, who was leaning against the doorframe, looking tired but content. This wasn't a foster home. This was a headquarters. A hero base. Izuku started, his voice trembling. I really like your radio show. The segment on villain psychology last week was insightful. Hisashi froze. Then he looked at Hibiki. Then he looked at Aizawa. Oh my god, he's adorable! Hisashi screamed, grabbing Izuku in a hug that lifted the boy off the ground. Hibiki, you picked a good one. We're gonna listen to so much radio. Put him down, Hisashi, you're crushing the child, Aizawa drawled, though he was hiding a smirk in his scarf. Hisashi set Izuku down. Right. Cake first. Then tour. Then we set up your room. We got you an all-might bedspread. Hibiki said it was tacky, but I said it was vintage. It's tacky, Hibiki confirmed, walking over and ruffling Izuku's hair. Izuku stood there, surrounded by the noise. Present Mike was laughing, Aizawa was grumbling about the noise level, and Hibiki was debating the merits of all-might merchandise. It was loud. It was chaotic, but for the first time since the building fell, the static in Izuku's head cleared. The cold, gray silence was gone. Izuku looked at Hibiki. Welcome home, kid, Hibiki said softly, hearing the boy's heartbeat steady into a calm, happy rhythm. Izuku smiled, tears prickling his eyes again, but these were different. I'm home, Izuku whispered. And then, just to test it, just to be sure he was allowed to exist in this space, he took a deep breath. Yeah! Izuku shouted, his voice cracking. Present Mike gasped, then cheered. That's the spirit! Again. Louder! Yeah! As the three heroes and the small, quirkless boy laughed together in the apartment, Hibiki knew one thing for certain. Life was going to be noisy. And he wouldn't have it any other way. 7 a.m. in the Yamada household did not begin with the chirping of birds, nor did it begin with the gentle buzzing of a digital alarm clock. In the apartment of Hibiki Yamada and his newly adopted son, 7 a.m. began with a bass drop. Izuku Midoriya jolted upright in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a split second, the disorientation of sleep held him captive. The walls were painted a soft, calming blue, not the peeling gray of the foster home. The blanket clutched in his fist featured a limited edition all-might print from the Silver Age, not the scratchy wool of the state-issued bedding. From the kitchen down the hall, a voice that could shatter glass, but was currently dialed down to a respectable indoor shout, boomed. Good morning, listeners. The toast is burning, the coffee is blacker than my soul, and the sun is shining. Can I get a hell yeah? Dad, it's 7 in the morning. Tone it down to a 3, a younger, smoother voice replied. Hibiki. A 3? I can't hear you over the sound of vitamin C. Orange juice is on the table. Izuku blinked, the tension slowly bleeding out of his shoulders. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He wasn't in the rubble. He wasn't in the foster home. He was in the home of the loudest family on earth. He slid out of bed, his feet sinking into the plush carpet. He walked to the mirror hanging on the back of his door. He looked different than he had a month ago. He was still small, still scrawny, and his green hair was still an untamable bush. But the dark circles under his eyes were fading. The bruises on his arms from the accidents at the foster home were yellowing and disappearing. He was safe. But as he looked at his reflection, a familiar, cold thought crept in. You're safe, but you're still you. You're still Deku. He shook his head, slapping his cheek slightly. Analysis, he whispered to himself, a habit he couldn't break. Current objective, breakfast. Threat level 0. Allies 2. Proceed. Izuku opened his door and stepped into the hallway. The smell of bacon and high-grade coffee beans assaulted his nose. He followed the scent into the open concept living area. The kitchen was a war zone of culinary enthusiasm. Hisashi Yamada, pro hero present Mike, was wearing an apron that said "Kiss the DJ" over his leather pants. He was flipping pancakes with a rhythm that matched the ska punk music blaring from the high-end speakers mounted in the corners of the ceiling. Hibiki sat at the island counter, looking like the eye of the storm. He was dressed in a black tank top and sweatpants, his blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. He was reading a newspaper with one hand and drinking a mug of coffee with the other, seemingly immune to his father's volume. "Morning, Izuku," Hibiki said without looking up, his ears twitching slightly. "Heart rate is 72. Did the bass wake you up?" "I told him to start with jazz. Jazz is for sleeping, Hibi. Ska is for waking up," Mike shouted, spinning around and spotting Izuku. "Hey! The little listener is up." "Pancake?" Before Izuku could answer, a plate slid across the counter with perfect friction control, stopping right in front of an empty stool. Thank you, Mr. Mike, Grandpa?" Hisashi?" Izuku stammered, climbing onto the stool. He still didn't know what to call the boisterous pro-hero. "Call me whatever you want, kiddo. Just don't call me late for dinner." Mike finger-gunned, then turned back to the stove. Izuku looked at the pancake. It was shaped like All Might's face. It was perfect. "Eat," Hibiki said gently, finally putting the paper down. "We have a big day. I have the day off, and Dad has a half day at the agency. We need to get you registered for school, buy you clothes that aren't 3 sizes too big, and we need to have the talk." Izuku froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The talk. He knew what that meant. In every home he'd been in, the talk was always the same. "We can't handle a quirkless kid. You're too much of a liability. You need to be realistic." "Oh, okay," Izuku whispered. Hibiki looked at him, his yellow-tinted eyes narrowing slightly behind his reading glasses. "Not that kind of talk, Izuku. Relax. Eat the face." The adjustment to life with Hibiki was confusing. Izuku was used to being invisible. In school, being invisible meant you didn't get hit. In the foster home, being invisible meant you didn't get your food stolen. But in the Yamada household, invisibility was impossible. Hibiki's quirk, echolocation, meant he knew where Izuku was at all times. If Izuku sighed 3 rooms away, Hibiki heard it. If Izuku's heartbeat spiked because he was remembering the building collapse, Hibiki was there with a glass of water and a distraction within 30 seconds. And present Mike? Well, Mike was a force of nature. He treated Izuku's muttering not as creepy, as Bakugo called it, but as content. "Whoa, hold up, rewind," Mike had said earlier that afternoon while driving them to the mall. Izuku had been mumbling about the aerodynamic efficiency of Kamui Wood's new lacquer coating. "Say that again. That's brilliant. You think the gloss finish reduces drag?" "Hibi, write that down." "Driving, Dad," Hibiki had deadpanned. Now, back at the apartment, the sun was setting, painting the living room in hues of orange and purple. The shopping bags were piled in the corner, new sneakers, red high tops, Hibiki's choice, cargo pants, and a leather jacket that was a miniature version of Hibiki's hero gear. "He looks like a punk," Mike had declared happily. A tiny, green punk. But now, the atmosphere had shifted. The music was off. The doorbell rang. "That'll be him," Hibiki said, standing up from the couch. He looked at Izuku. You remember who's coming for dinner? Eraserhead, Izuku breathed. The Erasure Hero. Underground Specialist. High capture rate. Hates media. That's the one, Hibiki smirked. He's also grumpy, hates loud noises, and is probably going to criticize my cooking. Don't take it personally. Hibiki opened the door. Standing in the hallway was a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the dawn of the Quirk era. Shota Aizawa looked exactly as he had at the welcome home party, but even more disheveled. He wore all black, his capture scarf wound loosely around his neck like a depressing scarf. He held a plastic bag from a convenience store. I brought jelly pouches, Aizawa said by way of greeting. And cat food. For the stray out back. Not for you. Good to see you too, Uncle Sho, Hibiki said, stepping aside. Aizawa walked in, his eyes immediately locking onto Izuku. Izuku stiffened, his hands gripping the hem of his new t-shirt. This was Eraserhead. A hero who could turn off powers. A man of pure logic. Kid, Aizawa nodded. Hello, Eraserhead sir. Izuku squeaked, bowing a perfect 90 degrees. Aizawa sighed, scratching the back of his neck. Just Aizawa. Or Uncle Sho, if Hizashi forces you. I prefer Aizawa. Shuta! Mike burst out of the kitchen, holding a spatula like a microphone. You're late. The stew is simmering. Did you bring the drinks? Aizawa's hair floated up. His eyes glowed red. Mick's voice cut out instantly. His mouth kept moving, shouting hello, but no sound came out. Too loud, Aizawa muttered, his hair falling back down as he blinked. My ears are still ringing from patrol last night. Izuku stared, mesmerized. He erased the voice hero. Just like that. No hesitation. The speed of activation is instantaneous. Sit down, Shota, Hibiki said, guiding the Erasure hero to the table. Dad, stop screaming or you don't get dessert. Dinner was a beef stew that Hibiki had made. It was rich and savory, a stark contrast to the instant ramen Izuku was used to. But Izuku could barely taste it. He was sitting across from Eraserhead. Aizawa ate with mechanical efficiency. He didn't make small talk. He just observed. Every few minutes, his dark eyes would flick to Izuku, analyzing him. So, Aizawa said finally, putting his spoon down. Hizashi tells me you're settling in. But Hibiki tells me you haven't picked a school yet. Izuku swallowed hard. You Yes. The transfer papers. My old school, Aldera, they haven't sent the transcripts yet. Aldera Junior High, Aizawa grunted. I know it. Mediocre academic scores. High incident rate of court-based bullying. Not a good environment. It was, okay, Izuku lied. Don't lie to me, kid. It's illogical, Aizawa said flatly. I've seen your file. Hibiki showed me. The medical report. The table went silent. Even Mike stopped chewing. This was it. The precipice. You're quirkless, Aizawa stated. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact, delivered with the same tone one might use to say you have brown eyes. Izuku looked down at his bowl. Yes, sir. And yet, Aizawa continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. Hibiki tells me that during the collapse, you were analyzing his quirk usage while in a state of shock. And Hizashi tells me you criticized Kamiriwood's lacquer density. Izuku blushed furiously. I just like taking notes. Notes are good. Information is a weapon, Aizawa said. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Hibiki says you want to be a hero. Izuku's heart stopped. He looked at Hibiki. Hibiki gave him a small, encouraging nod. Izuku's voice failed him. He cleared his throat. I know it's impossible. I know the statistics. Without a quirk, the physical risk is too high. The police force is the logical path. Or support items. I know. Who told you it was impossible? Aizawa asked. Everyone, Izuku whispered. My teachers. The kids at school? The doctor. Aizawa looked at Mike, then at Hibiki. There was a silent conversation passing between the three heroes. Izuku, Hibiki spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension. Do you know what my quirk does? Why yes. Echolocation and dampening. You can visualize sound waves and create pockets of silence. Right. Is that a combat quirk? Izuku paused. Well, not directly. It's recon. Intel. But you use the silence to disorient villains. And you use a bow staff for combat. Exactly, Hibiki said. I hit people with a stick. That's my combat style. If I lose my quirk, I can still hit people with a stick. My hearing helps me aim, sure, but the takedown? That's physics. That's muscle. Hibiki pointed at Aizawa. And him? What happens when he blinks? His quirk deactivates, Izuku recited. Right. And when he's fighting a mutant-type quirk that he can't erase? Or when he's fighting 5 people at once, he uses his capture scarf. And martial arts. So, Hibiki leaned back. If Uncle Sho fights a guy with a sword, and he erases the guy's quirk, he's just a man fighting a man with a sword. He's essentially quirkless in that moment. Izuku's eyes widened. He had never thought of it that way. He always saw Eraserhead's quirk as the ultimate weapon. But Hibiki was right. Once the playing field was leveled, Aizawa won because of skill, not power. The doctor said I have the extra toe joint, Izuku murmured, almost to himself. He said it was the end of the line. Doctors look at genetics, Aizawa said gruffly. Heroes look at potential. Aizawa stood up. Get up, kid. Get up. We're going to the living room. Bring your notebook. The living room furniture had been pushed aside. Aizawa stood in the center of the rug. He looked looming, terrifying. Mike and Hibiki sat on the couch, watching like spectators at a coliseum. Attack me, Aizawa commanded. Izuku blinked. What? You want to be a hero? Prove you have the instinct. Attack me? Don't worry, you can't hurt me. Izuku hesitated. He was 7 years old. He was small. But this was an order from a pro-hero. Izuku clenched his fists. He thought about Bakugo. How Bakugo always led with a right hook. He thought about the villains on TV. He ran. He ran straight at Aizawa, closing his eyes and swinging his fist. It was pathetic. Aizawa didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. He simply sidestepped. Izuku tripped over his own feet and face-planted into the carpet. Irrational, Aizawa said. You closed your eyes. You telegraphed your move. You shouted before you moved, giving away your position. Izuku scrambled up, his face burning. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Analyze, Hibiki called out from the couch. Why did you miss? He moved, Izuku stammered. Why did he move? Because he saw me coming. So, what do you do? Izuku looked at Aizawa. The man was waiting. He's taller. Stronger. Faster. A frontal assault is suicide. I have no weapon. I have no quirk. Izuku looked around the room. He saw the coffee table. He saw the lamp. He saw the capture scarf hanging loosely around Aizawa's neck. Distraction. Izuku didn't run this time. He reached into his pocket. His new cargo pants had deep pockets, and grabbed a handful of change he had found earlier. He threw the coins at Aizawa's face. Cheap trick, Aizawa muttered, dodging the metal effortlessly. But in that split second where Aizawa's head turned to avoid the coins, Izuku didn't punch. He dove. He dove low, aiming not for Aizawa's chest, but for his ankles. He wrapped his small arms around Aizawa's left leg and pulled with all his might. Aizawa didn't fall. He was a grown man and a pro-hero. He was rooted like a tree. But his eyebrows shot up. Aizawa looked down at the green fluff attached to his leg. He lifted his leg, lifting Izuku entirely off the ground. Izuku dangled there, refusing to let go. Better, Aizawa said, a hint of amusement in his voice. He shook his leg, and Izuku fell onto the carpet with a thump. He used the distraction, Mike cheered. That was dirty. I love it. Aizawa looked down at Izuku. Why the coins? I couldn't hit you, Izuku panted. You're too fast. I had to make you look away. And I couldn't push you over, so I tried to compromise your balance. Aizawa looked at Hibiki. He understands leverage. Told you, Hibiki smiled. Aizawa crouched down in front of Izuku. Listen to me, Midoriya. Being quirkless puts you at a disadvantage. A massive one. You start the race 50 meters behind everyone else. If you try to fight like All Might, you will die. If you try to fight like Endeavor, you will die. Izuku felt the tears welling up again. Here it comes. The rejection. So, Aizawa continued, his voice dropping to a serious, gritty whisper. Don't fight like them. You have to fight like us. Izuku sniffled. Us? The underground, Aizawa said. We don't fight fair. We lie. We cheat. We hide in the shadows. We use tools. We use psychology. We strike when the enemy blinks. Aizawa reached into his utility belt. He pulled out a roll of gray, woven cloth. It wasn't the full capture scarf, but a training version, a long strip of carbon fiber weave alloy wire. This is a binding cloth, Aizawa explained. It takes years to master. Most pros give up on it because it's too hard. It requires spatial awareness, physics calculation, and prediction. It requires a brain. He held it out to Izuku. If you want to be a hero without power, you have to become the weapon yourself. Hibiki wants to adopt you. That means you're stuck with us. And I don't babysit civilians. Izuku stared at the cloth. It looked heavy. It looked like a promise. You mean? Izuku choked out. You think I can do it? I think it's illogical to waste potential, Aizawa said. And you're loud. You have the Yamada loud gene. But we can channel that. Izuku reached out. His small fingers wrapped around the rough fabric. It felt real. I'll do it! Izuku shouted, the volume surprising even himself. I'll learn! I'll work harder than anyone. Yeah! Mike screamed, jumping off the couch and sliding on his knees to join the huddle. Family training montage. Starting tomorrow. Hibiki walked over, looking down at the pile of noisy humans on his rug. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. Tomorrow, Hibiki agreed. But first, Izuku, you have school on Monday. The mood plummeted instantly. School, Izuku whispered, the fear returning. New school, Hibiki corrected. I transferred you. You're not going back to Aldera. You're going to Mustafa Municipal. It's closer to the agency, but the kid's there. If anyone bothers you, Hibiki said, crouching down and tapping the side of his own head. I'll know. And if I know, Dad knows. And if Dad knows, I will show up at the PTA meeting in full costume and scream at the principal. Mike threatened gleefully. And if that doesn't work, Aizawa added darkly, I will simply stare at them until they cry. Izuku looked at the three of them. The loud hero. The quiet hero. And the ghost hero. They were his family. He hugged the capture cloth to his chest. Okay. I can do school. Later that night, after Aizawa had left, taking the leftover stew with him, and Mike had gone to his soundproofed studio to record his radio show, Hibiki sat on the edge of Izuku's bed. Izuku was tucked in, the vintage All Might blanket pulled up to his chin. The capture cloth was sitting on the nightstand next to the lamp. You did good today, Hibiki said softly. Uncle's show is scary, Izuku murmured sleepily. He's a teddy bear. A very tired, unshaven teddy bear. Hibiki brushed a stray curl of green hair off Izuku's forehead. Dad? The word hung in the air. Izuku's eyes widened, realizing what he had said. I mean, Mr. Hibiki. Hibiki froze. His heart did a weird flip in his chest. He had been Dad on the paperwork for weeks, but hearing it in the quiet of the night. Dad is fine, Hibiki said, his voice thick with emotion. Or Hibi. Or Pops. Whatever works. Dad, Izuku tested the word again. It felt safe. Why did you pick me? There were other kids. Hibiki looked at the ceiling, thinking. You know how bats see in the dark, Izuku? Echolocation. They send out a sound and wait for the echo. Right. They send out a part of themselves, and it comes back to tell them they aren't alone. Hibiki looked down at the boy. When I found you in the static, you were the only thing that echoed back. You felt like family. Izuku smiled. It was a sleepy, content smile. Good night, Dad. Good night, Izuku. Dream loud. Hibiki turned off the lamp. He walked out of the room, leaving the door cracked open just an inch. He walked into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. He pulled out his phone and texted Aizawa. Reverb, he called me Dad. Eraserhead, don't get emotional. It impairs judgment. Eraserhead, but good for you. Kid has guts. We start at 0500. Reverb, you're a monster. Eraserhead, I'm a teacher. Go to sleep. Hibiki chuckled, tossing the phone aside. He closed his eyes, listening to the world. He heard the traffic. He heard the wind. He heard his father screaming enthusiastically into a microphone in the other room, and from the bedroom down the hall, he heard the steady, rhythmic breathing of his son. For the first time in years, the world didn't sound like chaos to Hibiki Yamada. It sounded like a symphony. And he was finally ready to conduct it. The next morning, 5 a.m., wake up problem child. Death before breakfast. Izuku was ripped from his dreams by a capture scarf wrapping around his ankle and dragging him out of bed. Gah! Izuku screamed, clawing at the carpet. Aizawa stood in the doorway, wearing a tracksuit and a grin that was far too sharp for 5 in the morning. Hibiki was leaning against the wall, drinking coffee, looking apologetic. Rule number 1 of the underground, Aizawa said, hoisting Izuku upside down. The villain doesn't wait for your alarm clock. Is this legal? Izuku shrieked, flailing. I signed the permission slip. Mike shouted from the kitchen. Run, Izukun. Run like a maniac. Izuku managed to grab the doorframe. He looked at Hibiki. Help? Sorry, kid, Hibiki shrugged. He's the sensei. I'm just the dad. I'll have ice packs ready when you get back. Aizawa dropped Izuku. The boy landed in a crouch, clumsy, but a crouch nonetheless. 10 laps around the block, Aizawa ordered. If you stop, I add a lap. If you cry, I add 2. Go. Izuku didn't wait. He bolted out the door, his mismatched pajamas flapping in the wind. Aizawa walked to the window to watch him run. His form is terrible. He runs on his heels. He's 7, Shota, Hibiki said. He's been running from bullies, not training for a marathon. He'll learn, Aizawa muttered. He has to. If he wants to survive this world without a quirk, he has to be faster than sound. Hibiki joined him at the window. Down on the street, under the pale light of dawn, a small green blur was pushing himself to the limit. He will be, Hibiki said. He's a Yamada now. We don't do quiet. Down on the street, Izuku's lungs burned. His legs felt like lead. But as he ran, he thought about the capture cloth sitting on his nightstand. He thought about the signed notebook. He thought about the word dad. I'm not Deku, he thought, forcing his legs to move faster. I'm Izuku Yamada. And I'm going to be a hero. He turned the corner, slipping on the wet pavement, scrambling back up, and keeping his pace. From the balcony above, 3 heroes watched him. The static had cleared. The frequency was set. The origin story of the loudest hero had begun. 7 years. To the average person, 7 years was a measurement of time. It was 1st grade to 8th grade. It was a growth spurt, a voice drop, a changing of seasons. To Izuku Yamada, formerly Midoriya, 7 years was a curriculum. It was 2,555 days of waking up at 5 a.m. to the sound of death metal or smooth jazz, depending on whether his grandfather, Hizashi, or his father, Hibiki, had control of the apartment's sound system. It was 2,555 days of running until his lungs burned, of being thrown onto gym mats by a man who looked like a tired caterpillar, and of learning that silence was just a frequency you hadn't tuned into yet. At 14 years old, Izuku didn't walk. He strutted. The alarm on his phone, a custom mix of his father's heartbeat rhythm and a guitar solo, blasted through his room. Izuku's hand shot out from under the weighted blanket, slapping the off button with precise, practiced coordination. He sat up, rolling his neck. Crack. Crack. The room was a shrine to his dual existence. On the left wall, the vintage All Might posters remained, pristine and worshipped. But on the right wall, the aesthetic shifted. Posters of the Sex Pistols, Ramones, and underground hero bands plastered the paint. A schematic of a directional speaker system was pinned next to a diagram of the human muscular system, marked with weak points in red ink. Izuku stood up and walked to the mirror. The boy staring back wasn't the trembling mouse of his childhood. He had grown into his limbs, lean and wired with swimmer's muscle, the result of Aizawa's hell spider training regimen. His hair, once an unruly mop, was now stylized. The sides were shaved close in an undercut, while the top remained a riot of green curls, often held back by a pair of yellow-tinted goggles that matched his dad's. He dressed with the efficiency of a soldier putting on armor. First, the compression shirt, to minimize bruising. Then the standard Aldera Junior High uniform pants, which he had tailored to be slightly looser for mobility. He laced up his boots, heavy, black combat boots with steel toes, regulation compliant only because he argued they were orthopedic. Finally, the jacket. It wasn't school dress code, but Izuku didn't care, and neither did the teachers anymore. It was a cropped black leather jacket with a high collar, similar to Hibiki's hero gear. On the back, stitched in subtle gray thread, was a sound wave pattern. He grabbed his yellow backpack, now reinforced with Kevlar weave, a birthday gift from Uncle Sho, and slid his headphones around his neck. Showtime, he whispered to the reflection. The kitchen was, as always, a sensory overload. Yeah. Toast is up. Toast is golden. Just like my grandson's future. Hisashi Yamada, present Mike, was moonwalking across the linoleum, sliding a plate of eggs toward the table. He was in his hero gear, hair already gelled into its signature spire. Morning, Grandpa, Izuku grinned, catching the plate before it slid off the edge. Voice modulation is a bit high for 7 a.m. You're peaking at 80 decibels. Can't stop the signal, baby. Mike finger-gunned him. You catch the segment last night? Obviously, Izuku sat down, drowning his eggs in hot sauce. You used my analysis on Empty Ladies Canyon Canon. You didn't credit me, though. Industry secrets, listener. Besides, if I say my 14-year-old grandson wrote this, the villains might come looking for autographs. At the kitchen island, Hibiki, Reverb, was nursing a coffee. He looked exhausted, having just come off a night patrol with Eraserhead. He was wearing sweatpants and a band tee, his hair loose and messy. Ignore him, Hibiki murmured, his voice a soothing baritone compared to mixed screech. He's just hyper because his ratings are up. Eat your protein. You have sparring with Sho later. I know, Izuku said, taking a bite. He said he's bringing the heavy capture tape today. The one with the wire core. Hibiki winced sympathetically. Ouch. Don't let it wrap your neck. Tuck your chin. Tuck the chin, drop the center of gravity, engage the core, Izuku recited. He looked at his dad. You look beat, Dad. Rough night? Drug bust in Narahata. Hibiki rubbed his eyes. Loud. Lots of gunfire. My ears are still ringing. Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, circular device. He slid it across the counter. Here. I tweaked the dampener prototype you gave me, adjusted the frequency to filter out percussive blasts, but keep vocal range clear. Hibiki picked it up, inspecting the soldering. A small, proud smile tugged at his lips. You did this last night? Instead of history homework, Izuku admitted. History is illogical. The past doesn't change. Hero Tech does. Don't let Sho hear you say that, Hibiki chuckled, clipping the device to his ear. He tapped it. His shoulders instantly relaxed. Oh, that's nice. That's quiet. Thanks, kid. Anytime, Dad. Hey! Where's my tech? Mike pouted. You are the tech disruption, Grandpa, Izuku laughed, grabbing his bag. I gotta go. If I miss the train, I have to run, and I'm saving my legs for the tape. Knock 'em dead, Izuku! Mike shouted. Make some noise, always! Izuku called back, stepping out of the apartment. As the door clicked shut, the smile on Izuku's face shifted. It didn't disappear, but it hardened. The warmth of the Yamada household was one thing. The world outside, that was different. He put his headphones on. He didn't play music. He just turned on the noise-canceling function, dulling the roar of the city into a manageable hum. Aldera Junior High was a cesspool of mediocrity. That was Uncle Sho's assessment, and Izuku was inclined to agree. The teachers were indifferent, the curriculum was stagnant, and the students were obsessed with a hierarchy based on genetic lottery tickets. Izuku walked through the gates, his hands in his pockets. The sea of black uniforms parted around him. 7 years ago, they used to trip him. They used to knock his books out of his hands. They used to call him Deku, the useless wooden doll. They still called him Deku. But the meaning had changed. Morning, Deku! A student with large stone fists sneered, stepping into Izuku's path. Nice jacket. Think it makes you look like a hero? Izuku stopped. He didn't flinch. He slowly lowered his headphones to his neck. Morning, Nishida, Izuku said, his voice projecting clearly, a trick Mike had taught him. Diaphragm, not throat. Your stance is off. You're leaning too heavily on your left leg. If I were a villain, I'd sweep the knee and you'd be eating pavement before you could activate your rock hardening. Ishida blinked, confused. Huh? Also, Izuku continued, stepping closer, invading the boy's personal space with casual confidence. That quirk of yours causes rapid skin dehydration. You really should be moisturizing more, or you're going to get microfractures in your knuckles. Have a great day. Izuku patted the stunned boy on the shoulder and walked past him. What just happened? Ishida muttered, looking at his dry knuckles. This was the rhythm. Izuku didn't fight them physically. That would get him suspended, and Aizawa would kill him. He fought them with data. He dissected their insecurities, their quirks, and their poor posture with a smile that was just a little too sharp. He reached his classroom, 3A. He slid the door open. The noise level was high. Kids were showing off quirks, laughing, gossiping. Then, he saw him. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, looking like a king on a throne of gunpowder. His eyes snapped to Izuku the moment he entered. Bakugo growled, the sound like grinding gravel. Leather jacket. You're late. I'm precisely on time, Kaken, Izuku replied, walking to his desk. The bell rings in 45 seconds. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. The dynamic between them was volatile. For years, Bakugo had tried to bully Izuku into submission. And for years, Izuku had bounced back like rubber. You think you're tough because you dress like a biker? Bakugo scoffed, small explosions popping in his palms. You're still a quirkless extra, and you're still leading with your right, Izuku retorted, hanging his bag up. We talked about this last week. It makes you predictable. The class went quiet. Everyone watched. This was the daily entertainment. The clash of the titans, or rather, the titan and the roach who wouldn't die. Bakugo's eye twitched. He stood up, kicking his chair back. You wanna go, nerd? Right here? I'd rather not, Izuku said calmly, pulling out a notebook titled Hero Analysis Number 13. Mr. Sato is walking down the hall. He's in a bad mood. I can hear his footsteps. Heavy tread. He probably spilled coffee on himself. Bullshit, Bakugo spat. 3 seconds later, the door slammed open. The teacher, Mr. Sato, marched in. There was a large, brown coffee stain on his shirt. Sit down, Bakugo. Sato barked. Everyone, shut up. Bakugo froze. He looked at the stain, then at Izuku. Izuku just tapped his ear and winked. Bakugo sat down, fuming. Freak, he muttered. But there was no heat in it. Just frustration. Bakugo couldn't figure it out. Izuku was quirkless. He knew he was quirkless, but the nerd moved like a pro, heard things nobody else heard, and looked at Bakugo not with fear, but with calculation. It drove Bakugo insane. The morning classes were a blur of boredom. Izuku spent most of math class rewriting the equations in his head to apply to quirk physics. If Uraraka floats a 50 kilograms object, what is the wind resistance required to move it laterally at 10 meters per second? Then came the afternoon. The dreaded career aptitude session. Mr. Sato stood at the podium, holding a stack of papers. He looked bored, so he began, waving the papers. You're all third years now. It's time to think seriously about your futures. I would pass out these aptitude forms, but... He threw the papers into the air with a dramatic flourish. I know you all want to be heroes. The class erupted. Hands turned into claws, eyes glowed, objects floated. It was a chaotic display of minor superpowers. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, Sato droned. But remember, public quirk usage is against regulations. Settle down. Teach. Bakugo's voice cut through the noise. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm going for the big leagues. Ah, Bakugo, Sato nodded. You're aiming for UA High, correct? The class gasped. UA was the gold standard. The impossible dream. I aced the mock tests. Bakugo shouted, jumping onto his desk. I'm the only one here with the stuff to make it. I'll surpass All Might and become the richest hero of all time. Actually, Sato interrupted, glancing at his clipboard. There is one other student applying to UA. The room went deadly silent. Sato smirked. He enjoyed this part. Midoriya. The silence stretched. It wasn't the reverent silence of a church. It was the tense silence before a thunderclap. Then, the laughter started. Midoriya? No way. Good grades aren't enough for the hero course. He's quirkless. He's gonna get crushed. Bakugo didn't laugh. He froze. His hands began to smoke. Boom! Bakugo blasted his desk, leaping toward Izuku. DKU. You bastard! You're worse than these rejects. You're quirkless. You think they'll let a pebble like you in just because you play dress-up? Izuku didn't move from his seat. As Bakugo loomed over him, smoke curling from his palms, Izuku simply looked up. His eyes were green, but in that moment, the lighting caught his yellow goggles, giving him a predatory, inhuman look. Sit down, Katsuki, Izuku said. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. It was the tone Aizawa used when he was about to expel someone. It was the tone Hibiki used when he activated the dead zone. What? Bakugo snarled, faltering slightly. Izuku stood up. He wasn't as tall as Bakugo, but his posture, straight spine, chin tucked, made him feel larger. I said, sit down, Izuku repeated, his voice cutting through the laughter of the class. You're making a scene. It's irrational. Irrational? Bakugo raged. You're the one dreaming. You can't be a hero without a quirk. Says who? Izuku asked. He stepped out from behind his desk, walking into the center of the aisle. The other students leaned away from him. Says the world. Says reality. Reality is subjective, Izuku said, quoting a line from one of Mick's late-night philosophical rants. Eraserhead fights quirkless 90% of the time. Sir Night Eye fights with stamps. Knuckleduster fights with brass knuckles. Those are pros, and I'm training to be one, Izuku snapped. He turned to face the class. The laughter had died down, replaced by confusion. You all think a quirk is a ticket to heroism, Izuku announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room. But half of you can't run a mile without wheezing. Ishida, your reaction time is 0.8 seconds, too slow. Tsubasa, you rely entirely on flight and have zero ground game. If I took your quirks away, you'd be helpless. He looked back at Bakugo. I've been helpless, Izuku said quietly. I've been the victim. So I learned how to fight without magic. I learned how to analyze. I learned how to survive. He grabbed his backpack straps, his knuckles white. I'm going to UA, Izuku declared. And I'm not going to be a sidekick. I'm going to be the first quirkless pro hero. If you have a problem with that, you can file a complaint with the pavement after I sweep you. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Izuku held the room captive. For a moment, they didn't see Deku the quirkless. They saw someone dangerous. Sit down, Midoriya, Mr. Sato said, his voice trembling slightly. And Bakugo. Back to your seat. Bakugo stared at Izuku. His breathing was heavy. He looked like he wanted to explode, but there was something in Izuku's eyes, a dull, flat certainty, that stopped him. Bakugo sat. He didn't speak. He just glared at his desk, his mind racing. Since when did the nerd get teeth? The end of the day couldn't come fast enough. As Izuku packed his bag, he felt the adrenaline crash. His hands shook slightly. Channeling the Yamada confidence was exhausting. Deep down, the doubt was always there, a low-frequency hum. What if they're right? What if I fail? He walked out of the school, head down, putting his headphones back on. He needed music. He needed loud, thrashing punk rock to drown out the voice of Mr. Sato. He didn't notice Bakugo following him. Izuku paused near the koi pond. He sighed, pausing his track. What is it, Kaken? I'm really not in the mood for. You're serious, Bakugo said. He wasn't yelling. He was standing 10 feet away, hands in his pockets. About you, eh? Dead serious. You're gonna die, Bakugo said bluntly. The entrance exam involves robots. Huge ones. I looked it up. You can't judo throw a robot. I know about the robots, Izuku said. I have a plan. A plan? Bakugo scoffed. A plan isn't a quirk, Deku. It's better, Izuku said. A quirk is a tool. A plan is how you use it. You have a bazooka for hands, Kaken, but you aim like a stormtrooper. Shut up. Bakugo stepped forward, smoke rising. Don't look down on me. I'm going to be number one. Me. Not you. Then prove it, Izuku challenged. See you at the exam. Izuku turned and walked away. Don't walk away from me. Bakugo screamed, firing an explosion at Izuku's back. It was a warning shot, meant to singe the jacket, to scare him, but Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't even turn around. Whoosh! A gray scarf whipped out from Izuku's sleeve. It wasn't the capture tape. He wasn't allowed to carry that at school. It was a weighted chain hidden in the cuff of his jacket. Izuku spun, the chain lashing out and catching Bakugo's wrist mid-explosion. He yanked. Bakugo stumbled forward, his blast firing harmlessly into the ground. You're loud, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice cold. But you're sloppy. He released the chain, letting it retract into his sleeve. He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo kneeling on the pavement, staring at his own hands in shock. Izuku made it 3 blocks before his legs gave out. He leaned against a vending machine in a quiet alleyway, sliding down until he hit the ground. He pulled his knees to his chest. That was stupid, he whispered to himself. I revealed the chain. Uncle Sho is going to be mad. Element of surprise, problem child. I blew it. He buried his face in his hands. The bravado melted away. He was just a kid again. A kid scared of the future. BZZZT. His phone vibrated. A text. Dad, Reverb Mike says you're probably overthinking the day. Stop it. Also, pick up milk on the way home. The soy kind. Grandpa is on a health kick. Izuku stared at the screen. A smile broke through the anxiety. He typed back on it. Also, I might have traumatized Bakugo. Dad, Reverb good. He builds character that way. Hurry home. Uncle Sho is bringing pizza. Real pizza, not jelly pouches. Izuku stood up. He dusted off his leather jacket. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't born with power. He was born in the static, raised in the noise, and trained in the shadows. He was the green punk of Aldura. And he had milk to buy. The tunnel. The shortcut home took him under the highway underpass. It was dark, smelling of stagnant water and mold. Izuku walked in, his echolocation senses tingling. The acoustics in here were great. He clicked his tongue, listening to the sound bounce off the curved concrete. Click, echo, click, echo, squelch. Izuku froze. Squelch? Concrete didn't squelch. A medium-sized body, perfect. The voice came from the sewer grate. It sounded wet. Slimy. Liquid surged up from the drain. Green, viscous sludge coalesced into a towering shape with insane, rolling eyes. You'll make a fine skin suit, kid, the villain hissed, lunging forward. Izuku didn't scream. He didn't freeze. His brain engaged. Fluid body. No solid grasping points. Capture tape is useless. It'll slip right off. Strikes are useless. Impact absorption is too high. The sludge enveloped him. It forced its way into his mouth, his nose. Suffocation. He's trying to hijack my body. Izuku clawed at the fluid. It was like grabbing water. Think. Think. What would Dad do? What would Uncle Sho do? Sho would erase it. I can't. Dad would use sound. Sound. Liquid resonates. If I can create a vibration strong enough, I can disrupt his cohesion. Izuku couldn't breathe. His vision was spotting. But his hands were free. He reached for his backpack. Not for a weapon, but for the side pocket. He pulled out the portable speaker he had been tinkering with for Mick's birthday. It was a prototype directional sonic cannon, disguised as a boombox. He jammed it into the sludge, pressing it against where he assumed the villain's ear or sensory organ was. He cranked the volume to max. He hit play. Scree-Seach. A high-frequency feedback loop blasted out. Arg! The sludge villain recoiled, the fluid rippling violently. What is that? It burns! The grip loosened. Just for a second, Izuku gasped, sucking in air. He didn't waste a moment. He scrambled back, kicking the villain in the eye with his steel-toed boot. Get back! Izuku shouted, pulling a flashbang, another strict violation of school rules, from his belt. But before he could pull the pin, the manhole cover behind the villain exploded upward. Have no fear, the voice was booming. Iconic. Because I am here. All Might stood there, bathed in the dim light of the tunnel. He looked massive. He looked angry. Texas. Smash! The wind pressure alone was enough to peel the sludge off the walls. The villain was scattered into a million droplets instantly. Izuku was blown back, tumbling end over end until he hit the wall. Ouch, Izuku groaned, rubbing his head. Apologies, young man. All Might laughed, gathering the villain into soda bottles with blinding speed. I didn't mean to get you caught in the crossfire. You fought well. That noise was unique, Izuku stared. It was him. The symbol of peace. But Izuku didn't faint. He didn't cry. He looked at All Might with the critical eye of a Yamada. He's favoring his left side. His smile is tight. He's sweating too much for a single punch. All Might, Izuku said, standing up and brushing off his knees. Your form was sloppy, All Might choked. You excuse me? You overextended, Izuku said, pointing. And you're bleeding. All Might looked down. Steam was rising from his body. Poof! The muscular giant vanished. In his place stood a skeletal man coughing up blood. Izuku blinked. He clicked his tongue, sending a sound wave to confirm what he was seeing. Ha, Izuku said, tilting his head. Well, that's a plot twist. The skeleton man wiped blood from his mouth and looked at the boy in the leather jacket. You aren't screaming. I live with President Mike, Izuku shrugged. I'm immune to shock. So, want to explain why the symbol of peace looks like a haunted scarecrow? All Might stared at the boy. This wasn't the reaction he usually got. You're a strange kid, All Might wheezed. I get that a lot, Izuku replied, pulling out his notebook and flipping to a fresh page. Now spill. I have a lot of questions about your mass displacement. The sun began to set outside the tunnel, casting long shadows. And for Izuku Yamada, the static was about to get a whole lot louder. The roof of the multi-story building was quiet. Not the artificial silence of Hibiki's dead zone, nor the tense silence of Aizawa's glare. It was the silence of a balloon letting out its last breath. Steam poured off the massive frame of All Might. It hissed like a tea kettle, obscuring the hero in a thick white fog. Izuku stood by the railing, his leather jacket flapping in the wind. He didn't gasp. He didn't scream. He simply clicked his tongue against the roof of his mouth. Click! The sound wave bounced back. It painted a picture of bone density, muscle mass, and hollow spaces. The figure in the steam wasn't the Golden Age hero. It was a skeleton draped in baggy clothes. Deflation complete, Izuku noted, pulling his yellow goggles down around his neck. Mass reduction of approximately 200 kilograms in 3 seconds. Conservation of mass suggests the energy is stored elsewhere or expelled as heat. Given the steam, heat, the skeletal man coughed, wiping blood from his chin. You're taking this rather well. I grew up in a house with President Mike and Eraserhead, Izuku said, flipping open his notebook to a fresh page. I've seen weirder. Once, Uncle Sho slept for 18 hours straight in a sleeping bag hanging from the ceiling like a chrysalis. Compared to that, a shape-shifting number 1 hero is, statistically probable. All Might, the real All Might, sat heavily on the concrete. He looked tired. His eyes were deep pools of shadow. It's not shape-shifting, All Might wheezed. He lifted his shirt. Izuku stopped writing. The scar was a crater. It looked like a spiderweb of purple and red tissue that had consumed the entire left side of the man's torso. It was a ruin of flesh. Respiratory system destroyed, Izuku whispered, his analysis mode slipping into genuine horror. Stomach gone. How are you even standing? Willpower, All Might said with a grim smile. And a lot of surgery. 5 years ago, a villain did this to me. Toxic chainsaw? Izuku asked. You know your history, All Might nodded. But no. That punk couldn't scratch me. This was an older evil. One the world doesn't need to know about. All Might stood up, albeit shakily. I recount this to you, young man, not to garner sympathy, but to explain why I cannot simply say yes to your question. The question. Can a quirkless person be a hero? Izuku gripped his pen tight enough to crack the plastic casing. Because it's dangerous. Because the job requires you to put your life on the line every single day, All Might said, his voice grave. I have the strongest quirk in the world, and look at me. I am a half-dead man walking. If you go out there with nothing but gadgets and grit, you will die. And frankly, I don't want to see a fan die. The wind picked up, howling through the skyscrapers. The police are heroes, All Might continued softly. Detectives. Firefighters. They save people too. It's a noble path. But without power? To stand in the ring with monsters? All Might walked to the stairwell door. He paused, looking back at the boy in the leather jacket and combat boots. It's good to dream, young man. But you have to be realistic. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof. He felt cold. Not from the wind, but from the words. Realistic. It was the same word the doctor had used. The same word the foster care workers used. Realistic, Izuku muttered. He looked at his hands, calloused from swinging batons, scarred from Aizawa's capture tape. Was 7 years of hell for nothing? Was Hibiki wrong? Was Aizawa wrong? No, Izuku whispered. But the doubt was a static noise in his head, growing louder, drowning out the music. He walked to the edge of the roof. He wasn't going to jump. He wasn't that person anymore. But he needed to hear the city. He needed to find a frequency that made sense. Boom! A tremor shook the building. Izuku's head snapped up. His ears swiveled toward the shopping district, 3 blocks east. Explosion. High yield. Nitroglycerin base. Screaming. Crowd panic. Villain, Izuku identified instantly. He should go home. He should buy the soy milk. He should tell Hibiki that All Might was a skeleton, and that dreams were dead. But his feet were already moving. Dad would run, Izuku said through gritted teeth. Uncle Sho would run. He sprinted for the stairs. He didn't take the elevator, too slow. He vaulted the railing, sliding down the banister, his boots screeching against the metal. Tatooine shopping district. The scene was chaos. Fire licked the sides of the buildings, sending plumes of black smoke into the twilight sky. The crowd was a wall of terrified humanity, held back by police tape and shouting officers. Izuku pushed through the throng. Excuse me. Let me through. Analyzing blast radius, he reached the front line. The sight stopped him cold. The sludge villain, the one All Might had bottled, was loose. The bottle must have fallen during their mid-air struggle. And now, the sludge had a hostage. Explosions ripped through the fluid body. Orange flashes illuminated the green muck. Get off me! You scum! The voice was ragged, desperate, and furious. Kaken, Izuku breathed. Bakugo was buried to his neck in slime. The villain was forcing itself down his throat, trying to suffocate him, trying to take the body. But Bakugo was fighting like a demon, firing explosions constantly, keeping the villain from fully solidifying. But the explosions were causing fires. The fires were keeping the heroes back. I can't get close. Death Arm shouted, shielding his face. There's no room to punch. My wood will catch fire. Kamui Woods yelled, retreating. I can't fit in the alley. Empty Lady cried from the back. They were standing there. The pros were standing there, watching a middle schooler suffocate. Why aren't they moving? Izuku's mind raced. They're waiting for a quirk match. They're waiting for someone with water or ice. But there was no time. Bakugo's explosions were getting weaker. His eyes, Izuku saw them. Those sharp, red eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror. They were screaming for help. The static in Izuku's head vanished. The doubt from the rooftop vanished. There was no thought. There was only the beat. Izuku ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back here! Death Arm shouted. Izuku didn't listen. He broke into a sprint. His boots slammed against the pavement, a staccato rhythm of defiance. Analyze. The villain is fluid. Physical strikes are useless. The eyes are the only solid point. The mouth is the weakness. Izuku reached into his pocket. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a quirk. He had a Jansport backpack filled with textbooks. Hey! Slime bag! Izuku roared, projecting his voice using the diaphragm technique Mike had drilled into him. The villain's giant eye swiveled toward him. You again? Izuku spun, using the momentum of his run to swing the heavy backpack like a discus. Heads up! The bag flew through the air. It was a perfect shot. The corner of a hardcover math textbook slammed directly into the villain's exposed eye. Arg! The villain flinched, the fluid recoiling in pain. The grip on Bakugo's mouth loosened for a split second. Bakugo gasped, sucking in air. Deku? Bakugo choked out. Izuku didn't stop. He slid on his knees, dodging a lash of sludge that cracked the pavement where his head had been a second ago. He popped up right in front of the trapped boy. You looked like you needed help. Izuku yelled, grabbing the collar of Bakugo's school uniform. I don't need. Shut up and pull. Izuku snapped. He dug his heels in. He didn't pull straight back, he twisted. Leverage. Fluid dynamics. Break the surface tension. He began to claw at the sludge with his bare hands. It was cold and smelled like sewage. Let him go! Izuku screamed. You little gnat! The villain recovered. The sludge rose up, forming a massive wave over Izuku's head. I'll crush you both. Izuku looked up. He saw death coming down. He didn't let go of Bakugo. He tightened his grip. If I die loud. Smash! The wind didn't come from Izuku. A hand, large and bloody, grabbed Izuku's leather jacket and Bakugo's arm. I really am pathetic, a deep voice boomed. Izuku looked to his side. All Might was there. Not the skeleton. The Titan. He was forcing the muscle form, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, steam rising from his skin. I told you the traits of a great hero, but I failed to live up to them myself. All Might roared. He pulled his other arm back. The pressure dropped. The clouds swirled. Pros are always risking their lives. The sludge villain struck. Detroit. All Might punched. He didn't hit the villain directly. He hit the air pressure through the villain. Smash! The world turned white. The sound was deafening. A sonic boom that ruptured windows 3 blocks away. A tornado of wind pressure blasted upward, spiraling the sludge villain into the stratosphere, scattering him into harmless rain. The fire was blown out instantly. Izuku felt himself lifted off the ground, shielded by All Might's massive arm. When the dust cleared, the sky had changed. Dark clouds gathered. Drip, drip. Rain began to fall on the burning street. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Then, a slow roar began. He changed the weather. That's All Might. Izuku sat on the wet pavement, gasping for air. His leather jacket was slick with sludge. His hands were shaking. He looked at All Might. The hero stood tall, fists raised, but Izuku, with his trained eye, saw the tremble in the hero's legs. He saw the steam pouring off him in waves. All Might looked down at Izuku. And for a second, the number 1 hero didn't look like a god. He looked grateful. The aftermath. The scolding was inevitable. Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. A paramedic was checking his eyes for concussion signs. You are reckless! Suicidal! Kamui Woods was shouting, pointing a wooden finger in Izuku's face. You have no quirk. You could have gotten yourself killed and the hostage killed. Leave this to the professionals. That was dangerous, kid, Death Arms grunted, crossing his massive arms. You interfered with a hero operation. Izuku sat there, taking it. He looked small. But then, he saw Bakugo. Bakugo was being praised. That quirk is amazing. You held out so long. You're a natural. The injustice of it sparked something in Izuku's chest. Aizawa's logic. Hibiki's defiance. Izuku pulled the blanket off his shoulders. He stood up. Interfered? Izuku repeated, his voice cutting through Kamui Wood's lecture. The heroes paused. I interfered? Izuku stepped forward, locking eyes with Death Arms. You were standing there. For 4 minutes. I counted. We were waiting for a suitable quirk to You were waiting for the victim to die, Izuku stated cold, hard facts. Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the Hero Bylaws. In the event of an active threat to life where immediate quirk neutralization is impossible, physical intervention and preservation of life takes precedence over collateral damage mitigation. The heroes blinked. I created an opening, Izuku continued, his volume rising, channeling the mic frequency. I targeted a sensory organ, the eye, which forced a flinch response. That allowed the victim to breathe. That bought All Might the 3 seconds he needed to arrive. If I hadn't moved, Bakugo would have suffocated before you found a fire hose. You're a child. You don't have a license, and you're a pro who watched a child drowning in sewage. Izuku snapped. He pointed at the police line. I may have violated the vigilante ordinance on unauthorized engagement, but under the Good Samaritan clause, I acted to prevent imminent death. So unless you want to debate the ethics of your inaction in front of the press, Izuku gestured to the news cameras swarming the perimeter, I suggest you write me up for reckless endangerment, and let me go home. My dad is waiting. Death Arms opened his mouth. Closed it. Who is this kid? Kamui Woods whispered. I'm the guy who did your job, Izuku muttered, turning away. He grabbed his sludge-soaked backpack and walked away. The heroes didn't stop him. They were too stunned by the sheer audacity of the quirkless kid lawyer-ing them into silence. The walk home, the adrenaline crash was brutal. Izuku's legs felt like jelly. He was cold, wet, and he smelled terrible. Dad is going to kill me, Izuku groaned. I ruined the jacket. And I didn't get the soy milk? DKU, Izuku flinched. He stopped and turned around. Bakugo was running after him. His uniform was torn, his hair was deflated from the sludge, but his scowl was intact. He skidded to a halt 10 feet away. He was panting heavily. I didn't ask for your help, Bakugo yelled. And you didn't save me. I was fine. I was holding him off. Don't look down on me, you quirkless loser. You didn't win. I won. I'm the one going to UA. Bakugo was shaking. It wasn't rage. It was the aftershock of near death. He was trying to reassemble his ego, piece by jagged piece. Izuku looked at him. Really looked at him. You're welcome, Kaken, Izuku said softly. Bakugo froze. He expected an argument. He expected fear. He didn't expect pity? No, not pity. Understanding. Go home, Izuku said, turning back around. Put some aloe on those burns. And drink water. You're dehydrated. Bakugo stood there, mouth agape, as Izuku walked into the deepening twilight. The offer. Izuku turned the corner onto his street. He was 2 blocks from the apartment. I am here. A blur of muscle slammed onto the pavement in front of him. Gah! Izuku jumped back, dropping into a defensive crouch, hands raised in a Muay Thai guard. All Might? Izuku exclaimed. Why are you? Poof. Blood spray. Steam. Skeleton. I am here, All Might coughed, wiping his mouth. Young man. I have been chasing you. You are fast. I train with Eraserhead, Izuku said, lowering his guard. Why are you here? To scold me too? I already gave the lecture on Section 14 to the tree man. No, All Might chuckled. No scolding. I came to give you an answer. The hero straightened up. The wind blew through his hollow cheeks, but his blue eyes burned with a fire that hadn't been there on the roof. On that rooftop, I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I was judging you by the standard of the past. I was judging you based on my own fear. All Might placed a hand on his chest. Back there, amidst the chaos, amidst the pros who stood and watched, a timid, quirkless boy was the only one who acted. Izuku felt his breath hitch. You said your legs moved on their own, didn't you? Izuku nodded, tears pricking his eyes. Yeah, that is the essence of a hero, All Might declared. Stories of all the greats, they all say the same thing. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku clutched his chest. The words he had waited 14 years to hear. Not from his mom, who was gone. Not from his dad, who believed in him, but was biased. But from the symbol himself. You looked that monster in the eye and you didn't blink. You were brave. You were smart. And you were loud. All Might pointed a bony finger at Izuku. Young man. You can become a hero. Izuku fell to his knees. He slammed his hands into the pavement and sobbed. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a messy, loud, Yamada-style cry. Thank you, he choked out. Thank you? But wait! All Might waved his hands. The emotional moment is great, but there is more. I have a proposal! Izuku wiped his eyes, sniffing. A proposal? Yes. I have a secret to tell you. My quirk, it is not natural. Izuku blinked. Not natural? I was not born with this power, All Might whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next. I am the 8th holder. And now, I deem you worthy to be the 9th. Passed down? Izuku's analyzer brain rebooted. DNA transfer? Energy cultivation? Is it parasitic? Symbiotic? It is called One for All Might explained. A power that stockpiles power. I want to give it to you. Izuku stared at the skeletal man. The number 1 hero was offering him the strongest quirk in existence. It was the dream. It was everything he ever wanted. But Izuku wasn't just a fanboy anymore. He was the son of an underground hero. He was raised to look for the trap. To check the exits. Give it to me? Izuku asked slowly. Just like that? What's the catch? Catch? All Might blinked. Well, your body would explode if you took it now. You need to train. No, I mean. Izuku stood up, dusting off his knees. This sounds sketchy. No offense. But secret power passed down via DNA ingestion sounds like a cult recruitment pitch. All Might face faulted. I assure you, it is not a cult. I need to make a call, Izuku said, pulling out his phone. A call? This is a supreme secret. You cannot tell anyone. I don't keep secrets from my dad, Izuku said firmly. Rule number 1 of the Yamada household. If a stranger offers you candy or superpowers, you call reverb. Reverb? All Might froze. Wait. Reverb? The underground specialist? Hizashi's boy? Yeah. That's my dad. All Might paled. Oh no. He's very thorough. Hello? Dad? Izuku spoke into the phone. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm with All Might. Yeah, the skeleton version. Listen, he wants to give me a quirk. He says it stockpiles power. Is this a scam? Can you run a background check on a quirk called One for All? Okay. Yeah. I'll put him on speaker. Izuku held the phone out to the sweating symbol of peace. Hello? All Might squeaked. All Might. Hibiki's voice came through, cold and distorted by electronic fury. Why are you trying to feed my son your hair? All Might flinched. Hi, it's a metaphor. Mostly. Stay right there, Hibiki ordered. I'm 3 minutes out. If you move, I'm calling Eraserhead, and he will look at you very angrily. All Might sighed. I'll wait. Izuku lowered the phone. He looked at All Might. So, Izuku said, a small, mischievous smile playing on his lips. While we wait, can you tell me how the stockpile works? Is it exponential or additive? And does it affect your vocal cords? Because your smash sounded like a sonic boom. All Might looked at the boy, this terrifying, intelligent, fearless boy, and laughed. A real, genuine laugh. You really are Yamada, aren't you? Loud and proud, Izuku grinned. The rain stopped. The streetlights flickered on. And in the quiet street, a new legend began to form. Not one given, but one negotiated. The contract for the 9th user was about to be signed, but not before Hibiki Yamada read the fine print.